Hi folks, in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use Docker Compose. Docker Compose is really just a wrapper around Docker, but it provides a lot of nice features. So if we're to recap what we used Docker for last time, we used Docker to hold down an image, and we're going to show how to do the same thing with Docker Compose. Then we converted that image to a container, and again we're going to show how to do that with Docker Compose. And if you remember last time, an image is a blueprint to a house, whereas the container is the actual house that's been built and is being used, right? And then we're going to show how to map requests from a browser on the host to the container using Docker Compose, and we should see a response from the container within our browser. Okay, so maybe before we start, we'll discuss a little bit about why we use Docker Compose. So if you remember last time, we used this command to kind of run Docker container. We have to give it a name and then a port, and that's pretty simple. But as you can kind of imagine, if there's more configurations, this command gets longer and longer to type. It'll be more and more easy to manually have a typo. So Docker Compose kind of allows you to do something where you put it into a file and put all your configurations in the file. So there's less typing and less chance of human error. And with your experience with Git, you know that these files can then be tracked by Git and shared with the entire team. So if you share this file with a team, that means you're sharing the environment that the container runs in with the team. So that's how we share environments. And then again, no matter how many parameters we add, the command will still be the same command, which is Docker Compose up. They don't show it here. So the command will not get longer if you add more parameters and configurations. Instead, it'll be it's the same command, but your configuration file will get longer. Okay, so that's kind of the main reason. So some use cases is if you're onboarding a new developer to your team, and they're not familiar with like Nginx or some other things, then if they know Git and containers and Docker, then they might be able to uh, start getting their machine up and running with the environment and start being able to contribute more quickly. I've been on projects where a new developer, depending on their previous experience and how complex the project is, it could take up to weeks. But with containers, it really streamlined that initial learning curve or setting up the development environment. And one other thing is we can also script it out. Like this could be thrown into a shell script. So these commands with these long parameters could be thrown into a shell script, but there might be a lot of duplication in terms of the parameters, and the order in which the commands run might matter. And there's a lot of like checking, like, oh, is the container started or stopped? Is it running? Is it ready? Do we have the images downloaded? So those kind of things Docker kind of takes care of partially, but It's just more brittle having a shell script because it's more of an imperative step-by-step approach as opposed to declarative, right? Here we're telling Docker Compose we want this. We don't care how you get there, we just want it at the end. Here we actually have to tell Docker like, oh, do this first and then this, so then we can eventually get to what we want. So it is a bit more brittle. It's harder to maintain a script. And then an analogy to imperative versus declarative is going along with our home building analogy, is say I want a window on this wall. So that will be something that's declarative. That's our end state, that's what we want. We don't care how it's done. So an imperative approach to that same statement would be like, okay, leave a space from here to here for the window. Put the window frame in first, and then install the window. Right. So these steps, it might not be these steps specifically, but as an example, is one step, step 2, and then step 3, right? So that's kind of more we have to kind of take care of, whereas specifying what we want at the end is just a lot easier, and we'll leave the Docker Compose developers to figure out how to do what steps necessary to get to the end state that we want. And we don't need to worry about whether the container is running, stopped, how it's named, and all that minutia. Okay. Downside to using Docker Compose is we have one extra layer of abstraction, which is an extra layer of complexity, an extra dependency. We now have to make sure Docker Compose is installed as well, not just Docker. But luckily, the Docker and Docker Compose team is the same team, and they bundled their software nicely together. So it's pretty easy, and the extra layer of complexity is pretty small compared to the amount of value gained. So Docker Compose really buys us the freedom from managing the small details of using containers. And it is one step towards, because everything is captured in code, whereas in this scenario, we're running command line manually. It is closer to being that term infrastructure as code, which is a good practice to implement. If you're into what the industry calls SecDevOps, is a way to build out your cloud infrastructure in a very repeatable fashion. So Docker Compose is closer in line with that. Having these configuration files is closer in line with that best practice than running these commands manually. Okay, so summarize, we use Docker Compose because we can declare our requirements in a file. This file can then be source controlled and shared, and Docker Compose handles whichever order it needs to get to our end state. So we don't have to worry about details. So that's the declarative infrastructure as code portion. Okay, so now get started. So here's our VS Code. It's good to ensure that we have Docker Compose installed. So we can check the version as a way to ensure it's installed. And we need a compose file. So Docker Compose requires this file. So let's do that. So in our file system, let's do container demo. And then we're going to make our we should use the command line. I mean the VS Code. So new file, we'll say docker compose YAML. And in it, we'll have a configuration. So they don't tell you here, but if you look at Docker Compose website, they will tell you what you can put in there, and the first key is services, and front end is equivalent to this web. It's the name of the service. So we need services, and our first service is the web. Okay. So with this, we're now able to do this first step. We can tell Docker Compose to pull down our image. So here, we can verify that the image is not on our system. Docker Compose pull, and I'll start pulling the image required for our web service, which happens to be our Nginx image. And if we wanted to specify a tag, we can. But if we don't, then this is assumed to be just the latest tag. So here it's done pulling it down, and it pulled down the latest Nginx image. So Docker Compose also has a PS to show that nothing related to this compose file is running. And if we do Docker Compose images, we have to say web service. So we haven't created any containers, so that's why there's no images listed. So what we're going to do now is Docker Compose up. So this is the one command we can use, and no matter how many parameters we add to this file, it's the same command. So now we've created an image. And if we are, and again, the terminal's gone, right? It's being used. So if we Control C, we get the terminal back, but it stops the container. And if we were to do Docker Compose images web, it show that we have one container created using the Nginx image. Okay, so we now do Docker Compose up. I think there's a detached version of this. So detach. Docker Compose up, detach. We'll get our terminal back, and our container is running. So now if we do Docker Compose PS, it's running. It's listing on the port, but we're not forwarding anything to the port. Okay, so we're able to run, but in order to have our web browser connect to it, we need to kind of expose the port, which we have not configured here. So let's do that. We can before we do that, we can say Docker Compose stop. It'll stop the images. And if we do Docker Compose remove, it'll remove the images and containers related to our compose file. here it's deleting it. Okay, so now let's do our port. Here they kind of gave it for us here. We'll just go through how we did for the normal Docker. So we're going to say it's going to expose port 80. So one thing to note, YAML is very particular about spaces and in tabs, so make sure it's all lined up and you have the proper number of spaces or tabs, but I think it's safer to just use spaces. But I think there's a preference to use tabs. I mean, there's a holy war between tabs and spaces, so it's up to you, but whatever you use, be consistent. And because I'm kind of grading your assignments, if you can use spaces, that will help me out. Okay, so let's do the port. And run Docker Compose up, run it. Oh, so they must have changed it. This used to work, but they require a list now. Which is what the example had. So that's good. You can run detach, but I like just opening up a new terminal. So now I can do Docker Compose PS. And we can see that this port 51049 is getting mapped to a container. So we open that in the browser. Oh, let's reuse this old one here. So 51049. 51049. Again, we see our splash page. So we know that our browser is able to reach our container. But because we don't want to remember this this port number that changes all the time, because if we do .compose restart, I think it'll stop the container and restart it. So basically shutting down your machine and turning it back on. And if we do it Docker Compose PS now, it's a different port number. So we want, again, like we did before, we want to set it to 8080. And I guess when it restarted, it no longer is attached. So we can just exit out this one and keep this terminal. Let's see what happens when we do Docker Compose up. I think it stopped because it's noticed that we had a different setting and it's restarting it. So if we went to the previous port, no service will respond to it, but went to 8080, then we'll see the new the splash page from the new container. Okay, so that completes what we did for Docker here. One other thing I want to just quickly demonstrate here is I'm gonna just use a new, yeah, we'll split it. Okay, so we can have Docker Compose run web bash. So this will start a new container and will be in the context of the container. So here's our new container. There's two now. And this is actually inside the container. So we did Docker Compose version here. Docker Compose is not installed. I'm not sure how to start Nginx, but if we were to ping localhost, oh, ping is not even installed. So one of the things they want to do with images is to keep it secure by not having too many extraneous tools. So the less programs or command line or binaries or dependencies or tools inside the container, the more secure it'll be, because there's less things for attackers to attack. So the attack surface is smaller. So we can see it here. Maybe curl. Yeah, so if we did curl localhost 8080, nothing will work. It's not the same. So localhost is not the same when you're inside the container as opposed to the localhost out here on the host. So just keep that in mind if you run into issues. And so let's exit out of our container. So the container will stop. Docker compose ps. So that only shows the running one. Maybe all will show the stopped one as well. Okay. So now I'll clean up Docker compose down, which is the opposite of up. So that should hopefully stop and remove everything. And auto containers. I'm not sure if we're able to delete the images from Docker Compose. So this is to stop. Yeah, you might have to go with the regular Docker to do that. So I do want to demonstrate the start and stop. So yeah, so we have to do up. So that'll spin it up again. And if we to do Docker Compose stop, it'll stop it, but it won't remove it. And then see if we can start it back up. And here we can start it back up. Okay, and then again, to clean up is down. All right, so that goes through the same example we've done with Docker Compose. Hopefully you'll see that it's nicer. We don't have to worry about the names. If we have a PS somewhere that we run, you notice that we don't have to worry about the name. Docker Compose takes care of naming it. So if that's the name of the folder that we're in, or usually the name of your project, this is the name. The web is the name of our service. And then, yeah, all that is done for us by Docker Compose, and we just have to remember to use up, down, start, stop, restart. Those are the usual commands I use, and hopefully you can see that it's a lot less typing, a lot less error prone, and if we want to, we can start a new project in Git with Git init and commit this file and push it and share it with everyone. Which I will do once this video ends, so you can see the code that we use, but hopefully it's simple enough where you don't need to reference it, but it'll be there. I'm just not going to show it with this video since we've gone through that with Git and the Git videos. Okay, so thank you for watching. I hope you can understand the benefits of Docker Compose and you'll enjoy using it for your projects. Thanks.